to start with a story, two characters that you might be familiar with. Sorry, am I familiar? Okay, I just want to make sure. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson went on a camping trip. After sharing a good meal and a bottle of wine, they retired to return for the night. At about 3 a.m., Holmes nudges Watson and asked, "Watson, look up into the sky, tell me what you see." Watson said, "I see millions of stars." Holmes asked, "And what does that tell you?" Watson replies, "Astronomically, it tells me there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, it tells me that Saturn is in Leo. Theologically, it tells me that God is great and we are small and insignificant. Horologically, it tells me that it's about 3 a.m. Meteorologically, it tells me that we will have a beautiful day tomorrow." "What does it tell you, Holmes?" "Watson, you idiot, someone has stolen our tent." This story, to me, illustrates a profound point, an important point. And that is that what you see is more important than how you see it. What you see is more important than how you see it. Watson lists all the different ways that he sees the stars. Astronomically, astrologically, horologically, theologically, all these different lenses, all these different ways of seeing it. But he doesn't see what is most important. He doesn't see the basic, most important fact of the matter. The tent is gone. The reason we woke up and we can see the stars is because the tent is gone. Now, technically, Holmes also replies with a lens, and he's kind of replying with a practical lens. I don't care about other stuff. The practical lens tells me that our tent is gone and we can see the stars. But even then, the point is that the what that Holmes sees is determined by the how. He sees practically because that's the one that is most important. That determines how you see it. The most important fact that determines how you see it. And all the other lenses, he tried to get there. It didn't matter. He could have talked on and on and on about all his meteorological and horological and astronomical savvy. But until he got the basic fact, all that other information didn't help their situation. Wasn't going to solve their problem. Wasn't going to be the most important thing at that point in time. What you see is more important than how you see it. Now, this is in many ways the opposite of pervading conviction in our culture, which is postmodernity, which is relativism, depending on how you want to define it, different ways to say it. And this is kind of the idea, right, that it doesn't really matter what you believe so long as it works for you. And then there's the other connection that as long as it doesn't believe my ability to believe what I want. I appreciate your religious convictions. I appreciate your political convictions. I appreciate your economic convictions. But just don't let them in any way infringe on my convictions. Don't let them get in my space. It doesn't really matter what you see. It doesn't matter how true it is. It's not about the truth. It's just about your perception. And in some ways, that can sound kind of well and good, right? Okay, I am glad to believe what I want, and you can believe what you want, and we'll all be one big happy family. But there's lots of problems, I think, with this, and I just want to point out three quick ones. Number one, this just doesn't work. Any of you have been in a relationship for any period of time in any setting, at work, with your family, with your friends. If you have beliefs, if you have strong beliefs, they're necessarily going to conflict with someone else's. How you raise your children, how you conduct yourself at work, how you interact with your spouse. Your beliefs are going to be meaningful if they actually conflict with somebody else's. You can't just have a bunch of beliefs that never overlap with each other. That's not a relationship. That's not practical. It doesn't work that way. But as I also illustrated, one of the deeper points in Watson and Holmes' story is that when you say that, you're saying that truth doesn't really matter. It's just how you see it. But that doesn't work. There's certain times, there's certain realities where the truth matters. The fact of the matter matters, is most important. It doesn't matter how you see it. If you don't see the important thing, then it doesn't help you in any way. There's times when truth does matter. Because Watson could have kept on talking about all other stuff that he knew about what the stars looked like, but until he saw the basic, obvious truth in front of his face, it wasn't going to help the situation. Truth does matter, not just the way that you see it. But most importantly, this is simply not the way of Jesus. I'm sorry to tell you, although you're probably aware of this, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He's very forthright about if you want to come to the Father, you come through me. If you want to find the truth, I'm the way. If you want to know truth, you have to know me. And the New Testament demonstrates this. There isn't this idea in the New Testament of, well, we have our idea of Jesus and our beliefs, and then all of you are nice and comfy with your beliefs, and the polytheism and all the other religions of that day and age. That was not the way that the apostles in the New Testament framed their conviction. They believed, we know this truth that you need to know. We know this pervading, obvious, in your face truth that I don't care how all the other lenses tell you what truth is. We have this truth that you need to know. That is powerful, that's changing, that changes everything. And we need to tell you about it. We're not just comfy to keep everyone's nice, comfy boundaries. We have a conviction and a truth to tell. This is throughout the New Testament, but I bring it up because we're in a series on 2 Corinthians. And Paul demonstrates this very clearly in a very, I think, summative passage in 2 Corinthians 5. A passage that I think in many ways summarizes the message of the New Testament, summarizes the gospel, summarizes what believing the gospel means, summarizes this belief that we have a belief that we want to share and we don't just keep to ourselves. So in 2 Corinthians 5, Paul says, "For the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore all have died, and he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. All this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." This is not neat and tidy postmodern language. The love of Christ controls us. We are ambassadors for Christ, as if God is making his appeal through us. The love of Christ compels us to tell you, be reconciled to God. This ministry of reconciliation has been put in our hands so that God is pleading through me. The passion of Christ is pleading through me to you, be reconciled to God. It controls me, it compels me, it envelops me in my life and what I do with my life, and what the message means is it's all consuming, it's compelling, it's powerful. The message of reconciliation is not something you can casually believe without telling anybody. The message of reconciliation is not something you can casually believe without telling anybody. It compels you to share it with others. And there's a lot of reasons we could talk about why this is, but I want to focus on two today. Why this message is so compelling. This is a message you want to share, that you need to share. And the first point is that it is true for everyone. It's true for everybody. It's not true for some people and how you want to interpret it, and true for someone else and how you want to interpret it. The message of the New Testament, the message of Christianity, the message of Jesus is this truth is for all of you. This truth is for everybody. That Paul says, in Christ, God was reconciling the world unto himself, not counting the world's sins against them, the world's trespasses against them. The whole world has been invited into reconciliation with Christ. Everybody. Now, you might have different ways of finding that message. You might find different ways of perceiving that message, but that core message is the same for everyone. Christ is reconciling the world, everybody, through the cross, through himself. And this is what Christianity is. This is the claim of what Christianity is saying. We have this message that this guy Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I'm dying for everyone. I'm extending reconciliation for everyone. Will you believe it? And I thought of this truth and how it is so universal, but at the same time, it is very appealing, because we know in our hearts, and if you ask any kind of random person on the street, what do we want most? Or what do we envision for the best possible life? And somewhere along the way, they're going to say something to the effect of world peace, or love for everybody,
reconciliation for everyone. We envision a world, when we get down to our deepest desires, we envision a world where everyone's reconciled. We envision a world where all is forgiven. We envision a world of harmony and love and perfect reconciliation. That's what we want. And so the thing about Christianity to me, and I think for everybody, is that it is this universal message, but it's a message that appeals to everyone. It's not removed from reality. It's speaking to a core desire that we all have for love, for reconciliation, for harmony. And that's what Jesus is extending to everyone, that core desire we have for world peace is what the message is trying to say. Yes, God came down and sent a message of reconciliation to supernaturally give you the power to have supernatural, reconciled, harmonious relationships. Because we know the problem is that even though we want that, we can't have it. You can ask everybody, we want world peace. But we run into the sad reality that we can't seem to do it. No matter how much we try, no matter how many relationships we've had, the mess shows up. But Jesus is saying, I know what you want, and I stood in your place to take it upon myself and die and resurrect to give you the resurrection power to have that loving, reconciling life that you want. And that's supposed to be the church. That's supposed to be what the church is this message, this embodiment of reconciliation of all people. And I thought of this movie clip from Miss Congeniality. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. Very gospel-centered movie. Not that I remember. Now, there's one scene where they ask all the contestants, what do you think society needs most today? And it goes through like 6 contestants. I would have to say world peace. I would have to say world peace. Well, definitely it would have to be world peace. And Miss Congeniality says, better parole officers in all of our county elections. And world peace. And everybody claps, right? The point being that we know that the basic answer to what do we need most is world peace, because it does appeal to this core conviction. But we also know, based on what Miss Congeniality said, that it's unrealistic. That part of what she's getting at is, I know that everyone's saying world peace, it's fluffy, it's escapist. I want to say something very real, and then she concedes to, well, they want the fluffy and they want the nice and tidy. But the message of the gospel is saying that is obtainable in a way with the church, that we can have supernatural peace. We can have that kind of relationship that, yeah, on your own, in the way that we normally see this broken world, doesn't really happen. But in the church, it should happen. In the church, it is possible to happen because God gave us the power and paved the way for us to let it happen. So that is a truth for everybody. It applies for everyone. It's not a truth you can keep to yourself. The second thing about it, though, is that's awesome, but the other side of it is that it is a revolutionary truth. So as I kind of hinted at already, that is what we want. Jesus paved the way. It's what we're made for. But it's revolutionary because our instinct is to say, well, yeah, we really want world peace, but I want to do it myself. I want to create my own political or economic or family or educational system that's going to create the world peace. Through human effort, I want to create world peace. I want to create a reconciling, loving community. But Jesus is saying, yeah, that's what you want. That's what you were made for. That is the truth. But I'm telling you, you've got to completely desert your own effort, and you've got to lean on me to do it. You've got to sacrifice yourself to depend on me to do it. In a lot of ways, that is revolutionary. Now, revolutionary can literally mean it's a complete change. And complete change, in many ways, is a lens. You take a new lens, a new way of seeing reality that changes everything that you see. And that's hard. That's not comfortable. That's not easy. And our natural human lens is I can do it myself, or I can do it through some kind of human effort. The gospel is saying you can't, but Jesus can. And you've got to surrender your can't so that Jesus can through you if you really want that reconciling, loving community. Revolutions are hard, but revolutions are powerful because when you get that lens, it really can change everything. It can change the way you perceive every part of your life if you can let the lens really grip you, really come over your eyes in the way that you see everything. Think about the Copernican revolution. Everybody saw that it was a Ptolemaic universe, that the earth is at the center of the universe. And this guy comes along and says, no, the sun is at the center of our solar system, and our solar system could be even bigger. And for a while, people didn't like that. But the more that truth was out there, all of a sudden, one idea changes the way you see the universe forever. And now we all see it that way. One idea, one lens, one flip, and it changed everything about astronomy, everything about that study, everything about that field. That's how revolutions work. One thing, one lens, one flip, and it can change everything you see and everything you do. The Industrial Revolution. We had handcrafted things that we would make, and that's how we produce stuff. Now all of a sudden we have machines. And just through this one idea of having automated production, it changes the world. It changes economy, it changes travel, it changes everything. One idea, one lens is flipped, and now all of a sudden I see production, I see economy, I see all these things through a completely different lens and through a completely different reality than I did before. And those kind of revolutions are compelling. You don't take that and say, oh yeah, well now the universe is different. I don't really care about telling anybody about that. Wow, well, we can make machines and we can change the world's economy. I'll just keep that to myself. I'm comfortable with that. You want to share these groundbreaking truths. And one that I think is most illustrative of the fact that you want to share it, how it changes everything, is the supposed story, now we don't know how historical this is or isn't, but of Archimedes. When he discovers that you can figure the volume of an irregular object through water displacement. He sits down in his bath and realizes that the irregular object moves a certain amount, and then he figures out, because they didn't know how to do that. How do you measure the volume of an irregular object? He figures it out, and the story is he jumps out of his bath and runs through Syracuse naked saying, Eureka! Eureka, I figured it out. I don't want you to be that excited about the gospel revolution, but so exciting that you want to tell people. Revolutionary truths are not truths you want to keep to yourself, but truths you want to share, because that one lens, that one flip can change everything. And what the gospel is saying is that through Jesus and through his extension of reconciliation, it changes everything. And that desire for world peace, that desire for reconciliation, that desire for beautiful, harmonious relationships, even in the mess of our humanity, is possible and is real, and you can obtain it through Christ. So I want to come back to part of what Paul said when he says, from now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. All this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. We regard no one according to the flesh. What Paul is saying, and this is kind of the big point of the lens of reconciliation, is that the world is now seen through the lens of bodily resurrection. The world is now seen through the lens of bodily resurrection, which is the marker of God's reconciliation to us. Jesus has now been resurrected, and so our bodies are now going to be resurrected. So this physical body and all of the brokenness and all of the issues and all of the problems we have is resurrected. There's a resurrection power now, but there's also an eternal hope. There's also an eternal peace to it, so that the perfection in the eternal is meeting the temporal and the messy. The resurrection power is now here. Jesus paves the way for now the power of resurrection, which is eternal and is supernatural and in some ways is beyond our world, but he brings it here into our bodies, into our world, into this place. That we see everything through bodily resurrection. That the resurrection power, that the power of God is in our bodies. And this is powerful and revolutionary and different because, especially when you compare it to other religions, where it's about the spiritual truth, it's about the flighty truth and the escapee truth. The power of the fact that Jesus literally comes back with a hole in his side and holes in his hands is to say that the resurrection power, the reconciliation message is now here in your bodies, in this world. The kingdom of heaven is here. It's not escapist. It's not far away. There is an eternal peace, but it's very present. It's very temporal. It's here and now. The resurrection power is in your body, in your world, in this place, here and now. That we believe that the supernatural can meet us in this world. And the marker of that should be, prayerfully is, reconciliation, the church capital C, supernatural relationships, where we really can have that world peace, where we really can transcend all of our junk through the power of the resurrection, through the power of the message of reconciliation. So every relationship, every struggle, every triumph, everything is seen now through the lens of resurrection. Everything is seen through the lens of resurrection. There's hope eternal, but there's hope here and now. So every fight that you have, every disagreement that we have, every preference that we run into, every church conflict that we run into, we know that when we are ultimately resurrected, those resolutions, I guess, will be much more perfect and maybe a little less messy. But we know that here and now, that resurrection power is here as well. That here and now we can work through the mess. That here and now we can work through our issues. That here and now, that resurrection power can build a reconciliation community that is powerful and is compelling and is one that you want to share, one that you want to tell other people about. That is supposed to be the church, and that is what's supposed to be compelling about the church, is the amazing message of the church, that we can be so human, but we believe there's a supernatural power here and now that makes us have supernatural, powerful, reconciling relationships. The resurrection is working in our community. And so this is why Paul says, the love of Christ controls me. It compels me. We've been given this message. We are ambassadors for Christ, as if he's making this plea through me, because this is revolutionary. This is powerful. This is changing everything about the way that we see life and relationships. That we really can't have that world peace, a picture of it, because of what Jesus has done. With that presented, this is one of those simple things where that is the message of the gospel. That is the plea that Paul is making. That's the plea the gospel makes. And we just have the simple question to ask ourselves of, will we believe it? Will we practice it? Because we have a couple of things that we can naturally do, and we've probably heard in some ways the basic gospel message maybe a million times in our lives. But we can deny it. But part of denying this kind of thing, I think, is what are we comfortable with, and are we afraid of change? Because the thing about revolutionary truths, you go back to the Copernican revolution, you go to the Industrial Revolution, any revolution throughout history, you always have what they call the slow adopters, right? That revolution is hard because it's a complete change. And completely surrendering yourself and saying, Jesus, it's only through you that I can love perfectly, requires a constant death of self, requires a constant death of your preferences, requires a lot of self-examination with the cross to see what are the things in me that are keeping me from practicing reconciliation? What are the things in me that are making me a hostile person or an overly passive and self-doubting person that I don't take the risk of a relationship? What are the things in me that keep me from practicing this truth and this belief that we really should have supernaturally awesome and powerful and compelling, trusting, revolutionary relationships? What are those things in me that would keep me from that? Because the thing about disbelief, we think, well, I just really struggle to do that. Disbelief means there's some other belief that's just stronger. When you say, I just can't really practice that kind of trust, I can't really practice that kind of sacrifice, I can't really practice that kind of challenge, what you're saying is there's some other belief somewhere that says you can't challenge someone too much or they won't like you, or you can't sacrifice that much or they'll take advantage of you, or you can't be that involved in a church because the church will hurt you. There's some other belief that's causing this doubting belief to come to the surface. So what are those beliefs that hold you back from embracing the radical, compelling reconciliation message and embodiment of the gospel? And another thing we can do, we've heard the message so much, maybe we've just kind of gotten used to it and we can just sort of ignore it. We've heard the message of reconciliation. Yeah, I'm going to try my best to be a good part of the church. Yeah, I'm going to try to serve people. Yeah, I'll try to put other people first. I've heard it and it doesn't, really work for me, or I'm complacent where I'm at. And this is one of those things when, as a communicator, you try to think of all the different ways you can just try to get people to see what you're saying, right? But this message, even though it's been told a million times, should be the most powerful, compelling message there is. And there is a beauty and there is a compulsion to it when you really receive that Christ can help me to love supernaturally in all things. That should fill you. And Jesus says in John 15 that if you love one another and let my love abide in you, my joy will be in you and your joy will be full. Your joy will be full if you let the love of God control you, envelop you, control you, as Paul says, and not just sort of let it pass you by. And I thought of this scene from Hook with Robin Hood way back in the day, or Peter Pan, sorry. And he sits down, backwards. He sits down at the table with all the kids. I don't know if you guys have seen this scene, right? Sits down with all the kids, and they're going to have this great feast, this wonderful, beautiful feast. And they pull out all these giant dishes and trays, and it has steam coming off of it, so you think, okay, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then they take the lids off, and there's nothing there. There's no food. But all the kids are like grabbing food, and they're acting like they're eating it, and it's like grabbing a giant burger and acting like he's eating it. And Peter Pan, Robin Williams, is sitting there watching these kids, and they're acting like they're feasting. And he's like, he turns to Tinkerbell, and he's like, where's all the real food? Gandhi ate more than this. What is going on? And she says something like, you have to use your imagination. And so he's sitting there, and he's watching these kids have this glorious feast. And then finally, something happens where I guess he flips on his imagination, and the camera pans over, and there's this massive, immaculate feast that all of a sudden he is able to see. Giant turkey, big pies with frosting all over them, everything you can want, filling the table, this amazing, amazing feast that he's now able to partake in. And then he does. And I thought of that because I think so often of us in the church and this message of reconciliation. We might not have the lens on right. And the church should be having this amazing, compelling feast. But maybe we're sitting at the table and we just can't see it. Maybe we haven't put the lens on, and all we see when we go to church or we've read about, or we read the New Testament and we see what God is doing, and we feel like we're sitting at the table watching these people have this amazing message embodied and doing these amazing things, and we just feel like, well, where's the real meat? Where's the feast? Where's it at? I don't see it. And if we would just put the lens on, if we would just get this message, it's in many ways as simple as that. It's not hard. It's not your effort. It's not beating yourself up. It's just that belief that Christ is reconciling the world to himself, and he wants to implore the world to reconcile to him through you. And if we would submit to that, I think that's what flips that lens on, and we can see the feast that God wants for his church and begin to be a part of it, to begin to participate in it. My question then for you is, what might be those things that are keeping you from seeing that feast, that compelling, controlling, consuming truth? Are there beliefs of lack of trust in the church? Are there beliefs in frustration with the church? Are there beliefs of all different sorts that keep you from that complete sellout to the message of reconciliation with the church, but also with loving people outside the church, with loving people in all contexts? What are the things that would keep you from flowing in that jubilant, compelling message of the love and reconciliation of the gospel? I want to give you a minute, literally. I want to pray and invite God quickly to examine our hearts, because this is a process, and we're all going to be in process with this. Relationship is messy, relationship is hard, like we talked last week. But the message of the cross and of Christ is that he is enough. He has paved the way. He is reconciling the world to himself if you would just concede to that and be a part of it. And he'll do the work. You just have to concede to him doing the work through you. So what could be keeping you from flowing in that today? Jesus, I pray right now, I thank you that your Holy Spirit says, that you say your Holy Spirit will guide us into all truth. Is there hurt? Is there frustration? Is there just basic doubt? This is too ideal. This is too pretty. That keeps us from flowing in your supernatural love and reconciliation, being ambassadors of reconciliation at all times. I ask you to search our hearts now. The song that Chad is going to do is about us going out, sharing the message of Christ. Myself and Pastor Sam will be up front. If you want prayer, if there's anything you feel holding you back from the joy of this message, maybe it's grown old, maybe you've grown used to it, or just the practicing of this message in the reality of your relationships with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers, that you want that message to really captivate you again, to share this kind of revolutionary love in all contexts in your life. So we'll be up here to pray as the worship team comes and sings.